Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 6 o'clock special study session for the Newcastle City Council. The date is October 15th. We have a special study session this evening to continue talking about the 2025 budget. This session is being recorded and is available on YouTube. Please note that all council members are present except for Council Member Griffin, and all city directors are here and city manager. So at this point, City Manager Pingle, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Before we jump into the PowerPoint, I just wanted to review the follow-up memo from last meeting's budget study session. We put that in the packet right before the PowerPoint. So it's just the budget study session number 2 follow-up items. We like to do these after we meet each time, just because we continue to get information, specifically property tax information, just because when we first get our initial information from King County, usually that is modified as we go through the weeks, and so we want to make sure we keep that in front of you. And then anything else that we've talked about or that is brought to staff's attention that we want to modify as we move forward, just so that we're keeping track of changes being made to the preliminary budget before we put a budget ordinance in front of you. So the main question that we got asked last meeting that we couldn't answer in the meeting was the dollar value of the 2% COLA. And so I broke that out a bit in the memo. So the answer for the entire budget, the 2% represents $38,866. For the general fund, the 2% represents $29,561. And then I just wanted to clarify that the 2% was the proposed COLA specifically for non-represented staff. Our Public Works Union staff, their COLA is based on the collective bargaining agreement. And so their 3.42% is based on what's in the collective bargaining agreement. And that's, so there's, tells us we have to give them 90% of the CPIU with a 4% ceiling and a 1% floor. So their 3.42% COLA is required. We can't not give them that. And so if we look at the total impact, COLA impact, adding in the union's 3.42% COLA, then the total COLA for the budget represents $52,840, and for the general fund represents $33,967. On general fund revenue, just a couple of adjustments that we want to make sure is in front of the council. So our second tranche of information from King County Assessor's Office super boosted the new construction property tax value. So we went from a tax value of about $2,700 2 weeks ago to over $185,000 with the second go. I think we just got the third, but it changed by $44 or something like that. It was much smaller, so I think we're getting to where we're done with the changes. And so I wanted to make sure that was in front of the council. That changes, assuming the 1% allowed revenue increase on property tax, that would increase the property tax by $154,132. And so the total property tax number would be $6,548,576. If the council banked the 1%, it would reduce that number by $62,717. And so I wanted to keep that in front of the council. That's a major change. Usually we'll see, $20,000 or $30,000 swing in new construction, and so a $180,000 swing is big. And then the second adjustment is on the admissions tax. With the new information we received as far as what admissions tax might provide, we increased that by $45,000. The main reason that it's that small of an increase is specifically because one of the things that we hadn't thought about until Director Chambers pointed it out was that for 2025, the way we've put the ordinance together is that they'll pay us quarterly. And so for 2025, we'll only receive 3 payments. We'll receive a payment in April, a payment in July, and a payment in October, and we wouldn't get that 4th quarter payment until January of 2026. And so for 2025, the increase in the admissions tax from what we put in the preliminary budget is only $45,000. But then, so for a total of $245,000 in admissions tax revenue for 2025. And then we anticipate that that will grow to $350,000 in 2026 when we get all 4 payments. Any questions on that? And then the other one is what we've been talking about throughout the last budget study session, just on the other financing sources and other financing uses, reducing that from $750,000 to $400,000 on both sides of the budget, on the revenue side as well as on the expenditure side. And that's just an effort on our part for the budget to be a little more accurate on both sides. Generally that is developer deposits and is a pass-through. And so we're never at $750,000. I think it was just a number that's been put in there to make sure the budget is the same on both sides, but is high enough to account for developer fees. We're just bringing that down so we're not overstating our revenues so much or understating our expenditures so much. As far as expenditure changes, we did have a conversation in the last Finance Committee meeting, and we wanted to include some of those changes. As far as the city council meeting mills, the city clerk office and operating supplies, the planning professional development line items, those were where we felt like we had some room to adjust those line items and try to squeeze those line items a little bit based on our conversation with the Finance Committee. The other main one as far as a change was we noticed in the breakout for the membership and dues in the city council budget that we had not made an adjustment on the arch dues. They were still really low. It'll be about $8,100 more than we had in there, and so that'll be an adjustment up on our arch dues. And then again, the other financing sources at the bottom, matching the revenue side. So from the total change standpoint, again, on the property tax, that number assumes the 1% increase in revenue. But we would, our total general fund revenue would be reduced by $150,868. Again, the biggest chunk of that being the other financing sources. And then on the expenditure side, our expenditures would be reduced by $346,650. So the total impact on the general fund then would be the preliminary budget showed a surplus of $64,875. With the adjustments made, the surplus would then be $260,657. And so that is a total increase in fund balance of $195,782 with the adjustments made to the preliminary budget. Any questions on that?
Thanks. Are all these changes reflected on the online
No.
budget book?
They're not.
Okay. Are they?
That's why we try to put them in this format, just because these are changes that we'll plan to put in a budget ordinance that's for adoption.
So the what's online won't change?
It won't reflect this until we adopt the budget.
Until we adopt it. But can we get like updated pages for our budget book or?
No, we'd have to, so it requires us to unlock it and lock it and make those changes. It makes for a lot of process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Changes to this that we discussed during our finance meeting.
Yeah, so those are the line items. We made some adjustments on specific line items based on our discussion. And so, so this is just general fund ones, because that's what we talked about last time. So we made an adjustment in city council meeting mills, an adjustment in city clerk office and operating supplies, and then an adjustment in the planning professional development.
So how do I know how much of this total we have adjusted, like, you know, how we discussed like 17,200, 7,500, 47?
I'm sure we can update that spreadsheet for you if that's helpful.
Yeah,
And we
that
can
would
send
be
it out
next
to the
finance
council.
meeting, because I just want to
Yeah.
compare how much got reduced.
Yeah. Other questions on general fund before we move on? Will my driver go the first slide? All right. We're just gonna bust through some of these funds. These will be a little shorter than the general fund. The general fund tends to be the elephant. So for our debt service, not a lot of change. The main change from last year is just that the interest that we owe is less, and so our costs came down by a couple $100. So it's mainly from transferring from transportation capital. That's still the Coal Creek Bridge, and then the transfer in from the facilities fund for the city hall building. So again, the expenditures, it's just those two things. The Public Works Trust Fund is the payment on the Coal Creek Bridge, and then the LTGO bond is the payment on the city hall building. For the ERF fund, we've been talking about this one for a little bit. And so again, ERF fees is the main one that affects other funds in the budget. That had been up around $260,000, and now it's just under $200,000. Director Chambers has talked about our copier services a little bit, where we're trying to renegotiate that contract to try to make that $26,000 cost lower. But that's where it is for 2025. We are getting a grant for some park equipment for Donegal, correct? Donegal Park. So that's reflected on both sides. There's the $5,000 grant in revenue, and then the $5,000 for the parks equipment on the expenditure side. And then as far as expenditures go, really the main expenses are in machinery and equipment, and then in vehicles. And so a few of our, we're getting 2 flail mowers, and then the dump trailer, utility trailer, mini excavator, those are singles. And then the upfitting for NO18 replacement, that is all the equipment that will go on the vehicle replacement. So there's the $80,000 in vehicles, that's for the Ford 550 replacement, and then the upfitting amount is for the equipment for that vehicle. Any questions on the ERF fund? All right, next one. Human Reserve Fund. Again, the main revenue source is investment interest. This year it's at $127,000. Again, something to keep in mind on increases or decreases on investment interest in each fund is simply that we are now moving forward, the investment interest will be applied to each fund's investment interest based on that fund's fund balance and that fund's share of our investments. As far as expenditures, we have a transfer out to the general fund of $695,927. That's all tied to ARPA, and that's for our public safety contracts. The increase, so it was based on the increase that we were estimated from police and fire. The police contract stayed the same from what they had provided to us, which was $144,050 increase. The police, we had just gone off of a percentage, and what they actually provided to us was a bit higher as far as the actual police increase. And then the 12th officer cost was also a little higher than we anticipated based off the percentage. And then the flock cameras we had, within the plan is $18,000 each year for the flock cameras. And so the 18,000, the 273, 719 for the 12th officer, and then the 404, 208 for the public safety contracts increase is what makes up the 695, 927. Any questions on cumulative reserve? All right, facilities fund. Not a lot of change here. City Hall base income and City Hall CAM income, those are increased just based on our current lease agreements. And then the CAM income is based on those tenants' share of our maintenance costs for the City Hall building property. And then the reduction in the REIT transfer in is just based on the projects we have in the facilities fund. And then on the expenditure side, again, a lot of these changes are based on an anticipated move of public works staff to the annex building. And so office furniture, assuming we're going to establish office space at the annex for public works staff. The main increase in the professional building CAM is just including capital needs that we hadn't budgeted. We had it in the budget for a while after the building was built. We took it out just because we hadn't needed them. Working with High Point as far as building needs, we put it back into the budget this year just based on High Point asking questions on, hey, when do we want to do these improvements that are needed for the building? So we want to have them in the budget in case they're needed. If they're not, it'll go unspent. For the insurance on facilities, that's the big decrease. And so the main reason for that is we have changed how we're accounting for both how we pay for our property portion of our liability insurance, but also that cost we share with the building tenants. And so we get reimbursed from High Point for the building tenant's cost of that. And so this is just kind of the first year where we're going to change how we account for that rather, there's not a need for us to count it as a revenue and then an expenditure just because we only have to do that when money changes hands. We can just reduce that line item because we don't have to account for the reimbursement. We can just account for it in the line item. On the repairs and maintenance for the annex, again, just increasing janitorial, assuming we're going to have a busier, more full building. And then the annex building improvements is increased primarily adding in the cost of the restroom repair from the leak we had there. Questions on building?
And why are we moving everybody into annex?
A lot of reasons, really. Part of it is, making sure that we, have good oversight. It frees up space in this building that we can rent out additional space and have additional revenue for facilities. Being able to do that will reduce the need to then have the facilities fee we can reduce then the facilities fee that we charge to other departments. That'll have a major effect on the general fund. And so a lot of those reasons we're able to create space that we can rent out. We're able to put a whole department in the same house so that they can be together and there's oversight, efficiencies, etc.
Okay, thank you. And this 65,000, is that just for like one restroom repair?
So we had a leak in the upstairs restroom at the annex that then seeped through walls and all through the building. So the the, I'm gonna have Jeff help me, not the restoration, but the remediation's been done. That's the cheap part, but everything is still open there. We still need to repair it and replace what's broken and all of those things.
It's a total of 4 restrooms, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs, so that there's no flooring in the restrooms. The drywall is cut out, some of the ceiling's not been restored yet.
So, yeah, so most of that repair will be insurance funded. Right.
So then why do we need to put that in the, like, will we reduce that from the budget?
No, so that'll be an expenditure that then we would have a revenue on the other side for.
Okay.
I have a question for you. So, the repairs or the modernization, elevator, emergency generator, that sort of stuff, so we budgeted a lot of money this year. Did we do anything this year? Or are we just, is this, because in 2024, we have budgeted 330,000 and then we're 395 next year. So we didn't do any of that 330
That's right.
this year, right?
That's right.
So it's moving and it's increasing, that's.
Right, the main increase is because we didn't have the restroom repair in it this last year.
Gotcha, okay.
And then just something for the council to know is I think we have 150,000 in there for the elevator modernization. We would love to not do that, but we're waiting on a legal opinion from our insurance as to whether we have to. So it's a public building, it has a second floor and an elevator. Technically, we should fix it, but the building is not open to the public. And so if they tell us, no, you don't have to fix it, we'll just mothball it for now and not go through the expensive fix until there's a need for it.
Where are we at with the generator? Have we made any progress with that for either building?
No.
What's the status? I mean, we just,
Looking at design firms right now and talking to staff at Bellingham that had a similar project recently.
do we have an anticipated action on that at all at some point, like a couple months, year?
Yep, well, a couple of months should have a design contract.
Okay.
Target is before the end of the year.
Okay, is it feasible to have them done next year?
Certainly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on facilities fund? Okay. Swim. So this is what we didn't get to at the last meeting. So this is our other operating fund. As far as revenue changes, grants are way down, but grants are essentially project specific. And so less projects, less grants. The increase in the swim utility fee is reflective of the 3% rate increase. We had a rate increase approved through 2025, and so this will be the last year of a rate increase that's already been approved. I believe that a rate increase was estimated to be needed through 29, and we'll bring that information back to the council this coming year as far as then what may be needed. Reduction in investment interest, just like we've been saying, there's just a change in how we're applying that to funds based on their fund balance. Go ahead, Lindsay. On the expenditure side, again, noting the salary and benefits change, this is a fund that will share the Office of Support Specialist. And so there's some increase based on that. Really, the fund overall, as far as salaries and benefits, is not up as high as you might expect with a new position, but the benefits portion had been overestimated, and we've kind of brought that back to where it needs to be. As far as King County Services, this increase is primarily due to the addition of decant disposal. As far as questions you might have on decant disposal, I will have to have Jeff help me out. The excise tax for swim fees, the increase there is basically due to the increase in swim fee revenue. On repair and maintenance, We've had a continual need for increased vectoring, and so more vectoring is needed, which increases that cost, and then just the contract costs for that increase. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that is a contract that we're shopping currently, correct?
Oops, I'm sorry, I hit one of the. Not yet, but yes, we're gonna solicit bids and then have a contract before the beginning of the year.
Decrease in interfund services charges, just like we've talked about before, smaller overall capital projects generally make that dive. And then with general adjustments to the swim fund, that's lower. fees, I think we've talked about to death. fees came down significantly, a little over $12,000, again, just based on the new program requirements. And then a decrease in travel and training, just trying to streamline those needs. Yep.
What's a decant disposal?
I'll have to have Jeff help me with that.
So did I do it again?
No, I'm just gonna do that, you're right.
Yeah. So when the Vector truck, Vector's is a big vacuum cleaner that sucks out catch basins, and so the debris inside is called decant. It's considered, it's not hazardous waste, but it's not clean waste. You can't just dump it. So a decant facility will let the solids settle out and let the water seep out. And there's a decant facility that King County manages right over in Renton, but it gets billed to the city. Otherwise, the Vector company goes up to Snohomish County, and they're on the clock when they do that. So Brian Miller worked out an agreement where we would let our Vector company use the local decant at King County, but that is billed to us. They won't bill to the sweeping company. So the result, our sweeping invoices are lower. Excuse me, not sweeping. Decant is the cost of the decant get directly billed to the city, but in exchange, the Vector invoices are lower because of the, not only would their decant costs at the private facility in Snohomish County be charged through the contract, also their travel time. So it's a net savings.
Any other questions on swim? Any other questions on anything at all? All right, so I will just say again, staff would love for the council, if you have changes or things you want to have differently, the things that I've heard from a few of you individually is the COLA, is the 1%. We would love to come on November 5th with what the council is ready to adopt. And so if the council wants to have that discussion, we would love for the council to have that discussion so that we can come prepared for you on November 5th as to what you want to see. And if there's other items in the budget that we need to consider as well, we want to do that. But at least the last 2 years, and I don't know what the practice has been prior to my start, but we get to November 5th or the first meeting in November, and we've had our budget meetings, and then we haggle over the budget with a budget adoption ordinance that then we have to make adjustments to. We would love to come ready to that meeting with a budget adoption ordinance that you're ready to adopt. Does that make sense?
Don't we have to have a public hearing on the tax increase? When will that?
Yeah, so we have to have a public hearing on revenue sources and then another public hearing on the entire budget. And that will happen on the 5th as well.
So Tom called me today and he wanted me to ask, or at least put it on the table, and I think it's been on the table, but there's been some talk about affordable housing funded through the general fund. And apparently there's a possibility that could be funded through the REIT fund. Is that on the table or is that a discussion?
So that's something that the legislature needs to allow us to do first. So right now we don't have that leeway, but that's something that we've been pushing the legislature for the last couple of years to give us that. They need to provide for that leeway at the state level so that we can use money that way. The main problem that we have right now is that with both REIT 1 and REIT 2, your REIT expenditures have to be tied to a capital improvement program. And with Arch, that's never going to happen. We're never going to have a 6-year capital improvement program with Arch, because the way that Arch works is that they put out a call for applications each year. They receive applications, and then we decide on what to fund. And so we're never going to have, even 2 years out of what we're going to fund, because we do a call for applications each year. And so we have to get the state to allow us to not have that tied to a capital improvement program. And so I think that there has been building momentum for that, and there's even more so going into 2025.
So it would benefit us to fund it through REIT if we could?
It certainly would, if we were able to defer general fund costs through REIT. So something that you'll hear tonight when Shelley Helder comes, our state lobbyist, that maybe as a theme, and at least in the draft, maybe more so than it's been, but something that we talked about last year when we were talking about legislative priorities is that what we want, what the city of Newcastle is pushing, or at least we pushed it last year, maybe there's a little more consistent push for it this year, is that we want maintenance dollars rather than, most everything that we get from the state is for capital. We would love a little bit of maintenance help, both in the general fund, in the street fund, et cetera. If we can get some public safety help that is direct from the state, that would be awesome. If we can get some maintenance and preservation help from the state for streets that doesn't have to be tied to a capital project, that would be incredibly helpful. And so those are some of the, we kind of have that theme throughout at least the draft priorities as far as what we're going after from the state. So the same thing with affordable housing.
So let's, like the city manager said, if there's questions or things you want in or out of the budget, let's discuss them now. We got half an hour, right? So that when we come back on November 5th, essentially you want that resolved.
Well, so I don't want you to think that we can't make any changes
Sure.
and adopt the budget ordinance as amended. That's fine. But I bet you we could be really close if we have that conversation now rather
Right.
than on the 5th.
Well, I'll start us out. I'm the one who asked about the COLA, the 2%, and the number as you directed us was 38,866. I am for removing that. And the reason is, there's a couple reasons. One is, we changed the pay structure this year so that every person is getting a 3% according, if they pass their evaluations, of course, to the next pay grade. And the union contract has already been settled. And so that's in line with general public numbers. So for the last several numbers of years, I don't know how many, the staff has received 7%. Now, in rebuttal, somebody might say, well, the staff works really hard. I don't dispute that at all, right? But I just want our budget to reflect what people have to go through out in the general public. So that's why I'm asking for that 2% to be pulled out. And excuse me, the 38,866. Any comments on that? Anybody? What?
I would ask the city manager, how would that affect morale and staff? And do you have any thoughts on how that would affect your office?
I think it would have an effect. Even just the change from what had been required previously to what we put in the personnel manual, and understanding that I wasn't recommending 90% of the CPIU had an effect.
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that even during the finance committee. I mean, we all are facing a revenue challenge and, deficit for the future years. And the only one thing I said, that everybody has to chip in, all of us. It's not just the taxpayers, but everybody has to chip in. And I did look at our salaries and comparables with other cities, I think we are in a very good position. If we compare to Sammamish and Issaquah, our base salaries for our staff is in a very good position comparatively. I mean, those are like much, much bigger cities, 100,000 people and 50,000 people, and we are almost comparable to that. I think for this round, as we move in and find new revenue sources, and if we have to move in the future, I think for now, I feel everybody has to chip in. So I think for now we need to go with the, no 2% on the COLA. Even I would be supportive of that. The other question I wanted to ask, we discussed about increase in development fees, revision. Is that reflecting in the budget?
Not necessarily. We're still, we've gotten the final rates in for AWC, and so now that we have that information as far as like what the medical plans are costing us, we're going to come up with an average increase to staff salary and benefit totals, and that's going to be the amount that we'll use to increase the fee schedule items.
But we will have it in the 25 budget before we pass it. We will be able to put those in.
I think the revenue amounts may change if we don't have, well, it'll depend on if we have all that information available by November 5th to have it in the final budget. But it would be reflected in higher revenue once we get into 2025, after the fee schedule would be adopted.
Yeah, and even if we are not able to put it in the budget, we will be able to start the higher development fee from 25 onwards. We can get the benefit of that. From
Correct.
January onwards, we should.
Correct.
I mean, we
The
should
actual
do it as
fees-
soon as possible.
The actual fees would be reflected in the fee schedule, which currently we're working towards having that ready in December, so we can have it adopted before January 1 and have it be effective at the beginning of the year.
And then the other thing, are we reflecting, I know Erin and we are going to meet later once Erin's, when she has more bandwidth, we will go back into our economic committee and talk about the land and development and, the city land. Is that reflecting in the budget?
I don't believe so.
No.
Should we, Erin, should we put that, because by next year we should be able to take advantage of that, right?
This is my uninformed opinion, but I would say that it's probably premature at this point, only because we don't know, there's so much that we need to find out about the land and what we can use it for and any other stipulations that are required. Yeah, I think it might be premature.
Yeah.
So let's target to at least put it in 26, and maybe 25 if we are able to do something around it. Because 25 we look good in terms of balancing our budget, but 26, we can get more revenue. But hopefully, in the next few months, we'll be able to start discussions around that.
Yeah, I'll just comment briefly. So on both of those, so the development fees, so even if we knew exactly what the numbers were, we wouldn't go in and want to change our estimated revenues off of those very much, just because we also don't know. Our revenue estimates are also just based on current trends and what development we think is out there, and it's really a high level estimate. We're never going to be able to get so granular that we can throw in a 7% increase and just increase everything 7%. On the land, like Erin was saying, there's nothing for us to go increase yet because we don't know what we're going to do with it. Are we going to sell it? Are we going to try to do some kind of, land rental fee, or we don't know what we're going to do with it yet. So there's not something to go increase. And like you said, even if we had specific dollar amounts, there's not a need to include it too prematurely when we're able to balance the budget for 2025.
For the development fee, as long as we're charging higher fees, even if we
Right.
don't put it in the budget, I'm
Yep.
okay with that.
Yeah, so something that we always want to do, we want to be as close as we can on revenues and on expenditures in the budget, but it's better for us to be a little low on revenues and a little high on expenditures in the budget and then come in low on expenditures and higher on revenues. No. Like I said, we want to be close, but we don't want to be under.
So I'd like to add my support to Mayor Clark and Councilmember Lacotia's discussion on the COLA. And also I have a question about the 3% performance raises that people are eligible for every year. Does each role have a performance plan and KPIs and things like that go through formal performance evaluations?
Yeah, so everybody goes through an annual performance evaluation. Really the KPIs and all of those really depend on the position and what their goals are each year, but everyone goes through an evaluation process and sets goals for the coming year.
Are there any instances where the full 3% are not honored?
Yes.
Okay. Just curious how deep we get into the evaluation.
Curious about what?
About how deep we get into the evaluations, but it sounds like they're pretty thorough, so thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd personally like to just at least talk about the idea of, I'm not in favor of removing the COLA for a few reasons. One being, I think, sort of the precedent we've set the last 3 years is giving 4% COLA to the employees of the city. This is already a reduction in that, looking at 2% proposed COLA. When we're looking at a multi-million-dollar budget and, the numbers we're looking at are $38,866, it's not a lot relative to what we're working with. I think 6 of our city employees are already getting 3.42% COLA. Additionally, I don't think, we can look at comparison with other cities. I think when you look at a job market, you can't, it's not enough for us to say we're almost meeting the level of larger cities, and that's good. We have to compete with those cities to bring employees here. I think the city manager just said himself that there would be a negative effect. I think when you don't show employees you value them with their pay, they're gonna go elsewhere, and I don't blame them for that. I think that's true in any industry. So I wouldn't be in favor of removing the COLA. I think it's important to show the people that are working hard that we value them. I understand that vote might go a different way, but I think I think it does make a difference. We've already reduced it from the past. It's not a lot of money relative to these other numbers we're seeing, especially when we're talking about, we just get new estimates in, even from 2 weeks ago that are more than, give us more of a windfall than the entirety of the COLA would be. So I'm not in favor of it. We can do a straw vote on it or something of that nature, but.
Yeah, I would just add to Councilmember Charbonneau. I'm seeing a really amazing work on this budget from the entire staff. I mean, really getting in there and making changes that benefit the city a lot, and will it's just I can see all the hard work and really, really appreciate it. So yeah, I was gonna say also what Paul said about looking at a over $260,000 surplus. I think that I would be in favor of keeping the 2% COLA as well.
I'm also, I echo what Charbonneau and Councilmember Charbonneau and Sherlock, what they said. I really deeply appreciate all the city staff members and a great team, your dedication to our city. So keep that 2%. Yeah, thank you.
I can see we're going to have a 3-3 tie, so this is going to have to wait till next time. So just a final thing on that, I would say, is that, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but that's how budgets get out of control. It's a little money here and a little money there, and this is okay because we can do a little bit, and it all adds up. And I understand the arguments for keeping the 2%. However, we're trying to bring our budget in line with general public and be responsible with every single dollar, no matter how much the money is. So city manager, I guess we would say that, this, anticipate this coming out, but we have a tie right now, so not going to proceed forward. Any other comments about the budget in general? Anybody? Go ahead.
Did we want to discuss the 1% property tax increase, or?
I thought that would wait till we bring that up as a public hearing, but certainly we can discuss it.
I'm just curious, has anyone,
So to be clear, we don't have a public hearing
I'm
on
sorry.
the 1%. We have to pass a resolution
Right, but
declaring what we're going to do with our 1% increase, but we don't have a public hearing on the 1%.
in the past, like in last year, for example, we had a public comment period on that.
the revenue sources?
Yeah, we have a
Yeah,
public comment period on revenue
correct.
sources, that's it.
Right, and then we voted on the 1% after that. Am I not remembering that right?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. I guess that's what I'm stuck in my head. So, yeah, we can talk about the 1%. Sure, now, go ahead.
Just wondering if anyone has calculated what the levy rate would be if we banked the 1%, or we didn't take the 1%? Is that
I don't
something we
think
can
we have
maybe
that yet.
get
We
to
can-
us before the next meeting?
Yeah, we could get it to you.
Any general comments on whether to take or bank the 1%? My personal opinion is to bank it. Any other comments? So we get an idea to the city manager?
Yeah, I would be in favor of banking it.
I agree.
Any other comments?
Can someone elaborate why you're in favor of that?
Sure, I'll go, because that's a direct impact on the public. It's my personal opinion is the government's responsibility to ease the burden on the public. So any taxes to me are not a beneficial thing to the public. So I'm not going to vote for additional taxes when people are struggling out there. The inflation is insane, and it might be only $1 or something, but that's a lot of money to some people. So I'm not going to take money from people that we don't need to take it from.
I mean, we received the ARPA and a lot of benefits were given, but then the general public didn't get anything from the ARPA. So this is a way of, giving it back. And gosh, lost my train of thoughts. But yeah, I mean, it's more of a sentiment. I know it's only, $62,000, but it kind of creates that sentiment when, you just say that, okay, we are not taxing you this year, no 1% property tax. And a lot of levies are coming in place, so property taxes are like going up like crazy in this area. So this is just more of a sentiment, and our budget has been balanced this year, so I think we can afford to do that. So we haven't, I don't think so, we've given this 1% benefit for many years, so I think now is a good, yeah. So I think, if we can, then why not?
Yeah, my position on that is similar to the last couple of comments, but I think we also need to be fully aware of what's happened with the cost of living in the last few years, and it's very expensive for people, especially people on fixed incomes. So if we don't have to reach into the pockets of our taxpayers, then I don't think we need to. As long as we can still afford to provide critical services for the community, I think we need to pay close attention to the broader picture of how people are struggling just to make ends meet, regardless of what neighborhood we're in.
So to be really clear to anyone who's listening, and Len, who's the sole audience member tonight, this 1% does not raise everyone's property taxes by 1%. Just everyone, just to be very clear, because I know that's confusing, but that is not what this means. What it means is the entire dollar amount of property taxes that the city of Newcastle takes, we're raising that dollar amount by 1%, which then means you add that, which is about $64,000, right, this year. And then you add that $64,000 to the dollar amount that was collected from the last year. Then that new dollar amount is what the city can collect total. So that's where that's where the levy rate comes in. The assessed value of your home, then you have to do math and figure out what your portion of that total dollar amount is, right?
Yes, so I just did a quick calculation with the most recent preliminary worksheet we had. With the 1%, the levy rate they're estimating is 1.1059, so just over $1.10. And then if we took out the 1%, it would be 1.0953. So a difference of a little more than a penny.
Thank you. And can you, when you send that, or when whoever sends it to the council in between the meetings, can you, there was in the last meeting, there was a slide about kind of a average home. If we could have both versions just to be able to see the difference, that would be really helpful for me. So still, you know, the city would be collecting 1% more in dollars. My concern is when cities make the decision to bank 1%, that means that in the future, some point in the future, they're going to get hit with a 2%. Right? And so I just want to be thoughtful about that as well. It's not just this 1 year, and I'm not necessarily advocating either way yet, because I really want to look at the difference and take it in and make a real informed decision. But I do think that should be part of the thought process and equation, because in next year, are we going to want to take 2%, and what does that mean? Is it better to do very gradual versus a bigger chunk later? Maybe the answer is no, or maybe the answer is yes. I don't know, but that's just part of my thought process. So I hope we can all discuss that.
Go ahead, last comment so we can wrap up.
Sure, thank you. I know on the priorities for the Association of Washington Cities is, one of their legislative priorities is increasing to 3% the amount that what would apply here to these sort of like what municipalities across the state can take in terms of property tax. So I'm not, I would like to see the breakout on the numbers before voting on this and talking about all that. It is not a huge difference. I maintain that I think the biggest impact on what the individual Newcastle citizen is going to pay is from the King County assessor and not from the city. And I would maintain that. I think that's important to say aloud. So surpassing that, I personally find it ironic too that we're having this conversation, the cost of living selectively applies to Newcastle residents and not to our city staff when we're talking about tightening our belts and looking at all that. And I think I personally find the need to call it that irony from Councilmember Tallman of that it matters for the people we represent, but not the people who work to represent our city. So that's on the record. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to conclude the special session for studying of the budget. As far as I'm concerned, we don't need to continue this in the general meeting. Everybody concur? So the discussion on the 1% will take place again when we have the revenue discussion at the next meeting. So with that, we'll adjourn for 6 minutes until 7 o'clock. Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Newcastle City Council regular meeting for October 15th. The time is 7 o'clock. I'm Mayor Clark. This meeting is being broadcast on our YouTube channel, and it is also being recorded for later viewing. At this point, please rise and join us in the flag salute. City Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Burford.
Here.
Councilmember Sherlock. Here. Councilmember Griffin is absent. Councilmember Tallman.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Lakotia. Here. And Mayor Clark.
Here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Can I get a motion, please, to excuse Councilmember Griffin?
I move to excuse Councilmember Griffin.
It's been first and seconded to excuse Councilmember Griffin. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Councilmember Griffin is officially excused. City Attorney, you'll have a few words for us, please, about elections.
Once again, the city is in the election season, and I've been asked to provide comments regarding state law as it relates to the use of public facilities and election campaigns. In short, state law RCW 42.17a.555 prohibits the use of public facilities to assist a campaign for election for any person to office or to support or oppose a ballot proposition. The Public Disclosure Commission is the state agency with jurisdiction to enforce this statute. The Public Disclosure Commission interprets this statute very broadly to include a prohibition on using the public comment period during a public agency's meeting for these purposes. This applies to council member comments during a public meeting as well. To avoid any potential for violations of this statute, please refrain from making comments that support or oppose a candidate for office or a ballot measure. Please have your comments address issues relating to city business or city functions, not campaign or election issues. This includes references to election or campaign materials such as letters, flyers, or similar communications. The city thanks you for keeping your remarks focused on city issues.
Thank you, City Attorney. Are there any desired changes or amendments to tonight's agenda? Okay, we do have one from the city manager. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again, Council. We'd like to add in a brief executive session at the end of the meeting to discuss potential litigation with potential action afterwards.
Okay, so at this point, I need a motion to add an agenda item, and we would add it after the planning calendar to perform an executive session with possible action. Can I get a motion for that? Go ahead, Councilmember Charbonneau.
I move to add an additional agenda item, I guess 14.1, the executive session.
Can I get a second, please? Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded to add an agenda item after the planning calendar, 14.1, to just have an executive session. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, show the agenda amended as noted. Okay, moving on to public comment. If you're here tonight for public comment, there's a sign-up sheet over on the table. I'll call people up one at a time. If you are called, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood. You'll have 3 minutes to discuss whatever topic you'd like. And when your buzzer sounds, your time is up. We'd ask you to wrap up your comments and conclude. So I have a list here. We'll start out with Melissa Johnson. Come on up, Melissa. There's a button on the base of the.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. My name is Melissa Johnson. I live in the Winfield Ridge neighborhood. I've never done anything with the microphone before. Last time we were here, nothing worked, so we were in the other room. I am here to talk about saving my neighborhood. A development was recently passed or accepted. The Tool development, it's full go. I fully believe houses should be built on private property. That's a right we have. However, the city has insisted on putting a through road from 85th Street down to 113th, which will take our cul-de-sac away, which all of my kids have played on. I have 3 kids. They've all learned to ride a bike there. They've all ran around, had Easter egg hunts. We've hosted birthday parties in the cul-de-sac. We live in a very safe neighborhood with slow-moving vehicles. We know every single person that comes down our street and up our street, including the delivery drivers, the garbage men. If there's a car we don't know, automatically, we have a text message going out saying, hey, did anyone else see this car? And the city has approved a through road, which will be, in fact, the fastest way from 405 to North Newcastle and from Newcastle to 405. It will no longer be Southeast May Creek Park Drive. Now, I realize that this is not the time to discuss this. I thought I was following all the rules when I was talking to the city planners, and they gave me the instruction to comment during the comment periods. I'm very disheartened that no one told me that my comments were falling on deaf ears, that if the code allowed it, it was gonna happen, and that I should have been in the ear of everyone else. But I was assured that my comments were being forwarded on, that they would be addressed. Instead, they were forwarded to the developer. And when the developer responded that we can't do this project without variances to code and without taking the environmentally critical area of steep slope away, I reached out to Director Bronze and the planning team. For 6 weeks, I waited for a response from Director Bronze and got nothing. The next communication I received from the city was that we are going in front of the hearing examiner, which was great news because we had another chance to public comment. That was a farce. That hearing examiner did not care anything about what we said. It was about if we met code and if there would be legal liability. Well, I can assure you that when that steep slope is taken down and cars are racing through there, which they will, and they may be Newcastle residents, they might be neighbors. We all cut through. We are water. We go through the path of least resistance, that there will be lawsuits against the city because we have warned you. We have begged you.
Thank you. Next up, I have, and excuse me if I say it wrong, Rella and Camden Johnson. Come on up.
My name is Camden. I live on Winfield
Can you
Ridge.
pull the microphone? You can pull the microphone down. There you go.
And I just want a safe place so I could ride my bike with my neighbors and my sister. And so I could have my birthday parties and Easter egg hunts every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Rella. Camden, you want to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. I went backwards. Pardon me. Pardon me. Okay. Thank you all. Sarah Goodman is next up. Sarah?
Sad how short I am. Okay. I wanted to second what Lissa started. I won't recap, but I do really feel that our neighborhood, we have sent emails, we have messaged, we've been ignored, we've been disregarded, and we've been railroaded with this development. We're all in favor of houses going in. Our issue is with the through street and the safety of our neighborhood. We've talked a little bit about a fire gate and that being an option. I hate that that's the last resort and that we are here tonight begging for that, because really we'd like to not have this development happening the way it's happening. Again, we're okay with it happening, but we would really prefer that this through street not be a part of it. I'm one of 2 original homeowners left on the street, and it's really gonna destroy our neighborhood. So if you lived on our street, would you want this happening to your families, to your kids? Would you want your neighborhood destroyed? I don't think so.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate all your comments tonight. That concludes the list of public comments. Anybody in the audience want to speak at all? Seeing none? Okay.
I got something.
Oh, come on up.
She took me off. Jeff Johnson.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, we're crossed off, but go ahead, Jeff.
So probably the same kind of stuff. I think the process was just not the way we expected. The storm vault variance to me seemed ridiculous to go back to a code that was 20 years old to make it work. There's a fenced off area that's critical with signage on it that the builder, when they built it 20 years ago, couldn't build on it, but now somehow you can, and it's the only way to make it work. The builder's original plan was to put a cul-de-sac, put some houses at the bottom, some at the top. That's what they wanted because it was cheaper for them, easier, and they didn't want to disturb the steep slope. But the city wanted the road, and so they're going over the critical areas and doing the road, which none of the neighborhoods, no one in our neighborhood or the White Hawk neighborhood below wants it. And like all the other cut-throughs you've seen, I don't know what that street is on 116th where we have the new roundabout, everybody goes through there now. Nobody goes the other way because that's the way your apps take you. It's the fastest way. We're all in a hurry. Everybody wants the shortest route. So I see it bringing a lot more traffic. We have 11 houses in our neighborhood now, and now we're going to have, tons of people cutting down. And it's frustrating. That's why we bought that house. We wouldn't buy the house the way it's proposed, and we might sell because of this. So just tough. We've lived there since 2009. So paid $150,000 in taxes probably on that. So it's just frustrating, the process, I think. So I think that's about it.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, that concludes our public comment, our first public comment. There will be a second comment period at the end of our meeting. Moving on, we have no ceremonial presentations. We'll move on to council comment. Councilmember Sherlock, why don't you start us out?
No comment.
Councilmember Burford, any comments?
I just want to make my comment regarding our community member Frank Aragon, and such an influential advocate for social justice and a pillar of Asian American and Pacific Islander communities in Seattle and Newcastle, passed away on September 12th at the age of 77. So my heart goes to his family, his 3 children and grandchildren. Just my deep condolences to the family. I also remember Frank was also running for our city council position a few years ago. And just want to take this moment to make my comment and my deep respect to Frank. Rest in peace.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I just want to say, was great. Yes, was great last week. I got to go to Bellevue College to speak to the joint, sort of during their civic engagement week, speak to the political science and civics classes. They just sent me a very nice thank you note for that. So that was a great time. I appreciate them. And I'm looking forward to later in this month, I think October 26th, going to an event in Bellevue to speak. It's a gathering of sort of young leaders in the area in King County with some other council members from other areas. So I'm very excited to speak to that as well. And then I have kind of a lengthy PIC update, so I'll stop there.
Councilmember Tomlin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. I'm going to share a few public safety activities that we participated in this year but haven't really talked about. Some of them are more recent, but as I previously mentioned, our city clerk has provided ad hoc public safety committee basic information and updates on our city website, so thank you, Clerk Westman. Public Safety Committee member Amber Elam and I attended the Renton's Public Safety Forum held by Chief Schultz a little while back. I also met with King County Council member Reagan Dunn to discuss public safety, and I set up a meeting with the Covington's mayor and city manager to discuss public safety, which was also attended by Mayor Clark. This month I attended the King County Public Safety Summit on the Microsoft campus in Redmond, attended by city leaders, law enforcement, prosecutors, CEOs, legislators, and the press. It was about organized retail crime, and it was very insightful on how it begins and how it affects all of our communities. There are a lot of takeaways from these meetings I'll be happy to share with those who are genuinely interested. Also this month, along with Public Safety Committee members Len Troutman and Amber Elam, we attended the barbershop at the King County Sheriff's Office Training Center run by a man called Bishop. He's a civilian who developed an impressive program designed to close the relationship gap between the community and law enforcement. Here, we made a significant contribution to the process and strengthened our bond with police personnel, including Chief Kajihiro and Corey Martin. Bishop asked me to share this experience with the community in hopes of getting more people involved in barbershop events. Please look up barbershop and Bishop. It's an awesome program. Also, we have a long way to go. Today, I'm more invigorated than ever to improve public safety, and I'm proud of the members of the Public Safety Committee and the work we've done thus far. Law and order and serious committed leaders are the foundation of why our nation is safe and a global leader in individual pursuit of happiness. Sadly, it's become clear that most of this council does not take public safety or the roles seriously, as demonstrated during the October 1st meeting and the recent town hall meeting. Our jobs are very narrowly defined to principles and tasks focused on serving our community. Our job is not to pander to special interests, mock motives, or smear the reputations of fellow council members. If you wonder why trust in government is at an all-time low, just look at the lack of ethics on this council. On October 1st, Councilmember Griffin, bear with me. On October 1st, Councilmember Griffin and I raised ethics violations against Councilmember Charbonneau for lying about and making verbal attacks on the motives of other members of the council. Councilmember Charbonneau still has not addressed the lie he told, but rather
Point of order. Relevance to a topic that's already been discussed and settled.
So this is my comment. I have the floor, and I'd like to finish my comment.
Hold on. There's a point of order that we've already discussed. Like he says, this issue about whether or not he violated ethics. We're going to move on from that. We're not going to discuss that. I know it's your council comment, but that is not relevant to tonight.
Okay, during our session 2 weeks ago, Councilmember Charbonneau said that if an ethics violation occurs, it has to be brought up in the next meeting. Well, an ethics violation occurred, and I'm going to bring it up.
Okay, what is the ethics violation that you talking about?
The same one that happened last, Ethics Code Part A, which states officials shall refrain from attacks on the character or motives of other members of the council. So so there was a proclamation, a move for a Hindu Heritage Month proclamation. Local pastor gave a loving testimony about the Hindu community and urged the council not to vote for that proclamation because it puts us in a position where we have to be consistent with all other members of the community and different types of members. I made a similar heartfelt supporting Hinduism appeal supporting Hinduism. Then I voted not to vote because of my oath for impartiality. Shortly after my comments, Councilmember Charbonneau attacked my motives and those of fellow council members speaking to the Hindu visitors, quote, "This is about you and not about the political discussion that's going on here. Be wary of the people who talk about supporting you and then their actions don't line up with that. Be wary of people who say one thing and then vote another way." He called it a politicized process and stated that what might happen in the room tonight is not normal.
So
we're not supposed to attack other members of the city council and their motives, which is exactly what he did.
So he made a general statement, and it didn't include your name, right? So we mentioned, and by God, I'm tired of this. We said this at the end of the last meeting, that we were going to have a civil meeting at this forum, right? And everybody nodded, and they said they would do that, right? Now, I'm taking you at your word, right, that we're going to do that. So I am not going to allow this ethics issue to go forward because, you know, the choice of words maybe not, we're not perfect, but he didn't single you out. He made a general comment like many of us have made. Whether I support it or not is relevant, right? We are going to move forward. We're going to treat each other civilly, or I'm going to stop conversation. I'm just going to be a dictator here, right? I understand that you're passionate about this. I understand that you feel personal about this, but we're going to move on. So continue your comments minus the ethical charge, which we're not going to address because it's not a substantial charge. And I'm going to say it again. I'm requesting everybody's up here's support and concurrence for a civil meeting, right? We're not going to single each other out. I'm tired of that. We're not going to do it again. I'm guilty too, right? We're done with that, right? We've got another year and a half together, so we're going to make it work, okay?
Okay,
Continue.
so I'm not going to talk about that incident, but I'll just make a couple final comments and then I'll wrap it up. And I'll just say disrespect for ethics is not normal, but everybody wants to move on with business as usual, like what's happening right now. This divisive behavior apparently is not going to change. People, I refuse to hold hands with participants in this misguided, divisive, and unproductive environment with people who refuse to put the welfare of our community at the top of the list in everything we do. Effective immediately, I'm disassociating myself with this unhealthy, toxic environment. I could be more effective where I'm not consistently attacked by ignorance and hatred. I'm out.
Are you resigning, Councilmember Tallman?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
could I move for a recess?
I agree. We're going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 7:30.
say where the cameras, but I know where the cameras are. Oh, yes. That's right, I guess night directions always get out.
Okay, we are resuming the regular meeting. We have completed our recess. Councilmember Tallman is officially resigned from this council. We will obviously at a future date go through the process of selecting a replacement, but we don't have any information on that right now. Continuing on with council comments, I'll move on to the deputy mayor. Deputy Mayor, do you have any comments?
No comments.
Okay, my only comments tonight is, excuse me, a little irritated. My comments tonight is Veterans Day coming up on November 11th, so I encourage and invite everybody to join us at the flagpole out here at 9 a.m. There'll be an announcement. I forgot to have Amy put it in the report. Could you, thank you. And I'll put a notice out at the library as well. Hopefully we have nice weather for that. Okay, moving on. Next up is the Q3 capital improvement projects. This is, for the members of the public, this is in your agenda package. Director Bronze is not going to read every project, but he will answer questions from any council member who has a question. Any questions for Director Bronze on the City Manager, you look like you want to say something.
I do want him to just kind of talk through how a couple of our transportation projects kind of came together.
Okay.
It was kind of in a way that you aren't always able to plan for, so I wanted to talk through that a little bit.
Please do. Go ahead, Director Bruns.
Sure. Thank you, City Manager Pinkel. And also, the financials, even though it's only about a week old that I prepared that report, we've just approved some process payments. So like, for instance, the overlay project had year-to-date expenditures of, I don't know, something less than 100,000, but now if I were to do that, it's about 1.8 million, just since we processed an estimate. So right now we've got three contracts representing 4 projects, and we're forecast for the total contract price for all that work of 3.81 million. And we're taking into account some cost savings, efficiencies, and also utility reimbursements. We're anticipating that to come in about $123,000 below the contract amount. $10,500 of that is through cost efficiencies, and $112,000 of that is reimbursable work that is being paid by CCUD or PSE for raising their utility facilities in the roadway. So that's good. Just wanted to share that news. We did that because it wasn't highlighted in the report. Didn't have, like I said, this was just, we kind of had the awareness of this, but we couldn't quantify it to a dollar amount, so we had that come in the last week as the progress estimates were prepared. Just want to share that good news.
Okay, thank you.
And if there's any questions on the projects, yes.
I have one then, if nobody does. S17, we've talked about it for a lot of years. It looks like we have now $5.8 million in grants, and the project is $4.8 million. So is that something that's going to proceed now?
Good, and we just got one more grant from 1.5 million last week. So that should cover us for including the bridge. So that's going to be definitely an internal discussion now that we have the money to apparently fully fund it. Seems like we should go ahead with that. So so 2 of those grants just came in within the last 4 weeks. The 1.5 from King County Flood Control District with the support of Councilmember Reagan Dunn, and the other one was a FEMA high-risk dam grant, FEMA Federal Emergency Management Association, processed by the Department of Ecology, and that was, I believe, $2 million. That's the one that was included in the update. So yes, I'm actually quite surprised. I didn't think that, given all the other competitiveness out there, that the project would be successful, but I was proved wrong. And so we've been really successful getting grants for that project.
So you answered my question already, so that we can pay for the bridge out of that money. It's not, we can use it for that.
Correct. Right. It's all considered part of the same effort. The bridge is not the bridge, but the trail is an existing feature that the dam removal would impact, so then it's part of the project to restore that.
Great, good news. Okay. Any other questions for? Okay. Thank you. Council committees, any council committees? I know Councilmember Griffin is not here, so we had a finance committee meeting. Replaced Councilmember Tallman, I guess, in the nick of time on that committee. So I really don't have an update. Honestly, my brain is not working right now.
So, Mayor, he reported on the previous Finance Committee meeting at the October 1st meeting.
Yeah, I guess I've already, all right, thank you. Any other council committees? Salary and benefits did not meet. Economic and community development? No? Okay. Regional committees? Councilmember Charbonneau, go ahead.
Thank you. So I think moments of grace for anyone on council if they're still processing tonight. I'll just say that out loud now. So for Public Issues Committee for Sound City Association, a couple things. One, I was able to meet the new interim director for Sound City Association, former city manager himself, I believe retired now. So they've hired that person and then, or as an interim, and going through the hiring process there. They do have different vacancies at Sound City Association. If you know someone that wants to work for Sound City Association, encourage them to apply. They're pushing the due date for applications to regional committees back to October 30th. It was October 17th, so they're pushing that back due to the turnover there. And then the other exciting news is that I was actually, so they had asked me to apply. I was actually selected by the Public Issues Committee to be a member of the nominating committee. So I'm now part of, I'm representing the entire North Caucus, which is pretty much us and everyone north to Shoreline, as one of the 5 people on the committee that sort of decides where, that goes through all the applications for folks that apply to regional committees. So again, I'd really emphasize if anyone wants to apply to regional committee, this is a leadership position within SCA, so I'm excited about that, and it's great to kind of be able to approach it and have a say in the folks that are being involved there. In terms of the meeting itself, we talked about the Youth Action Plan update for the county. We talked about Rapid Ride Prioritization Plan. I think me and a few other people have continued to try to advocate for more East Side King County routes with bus. They went over their scoring system in terms of they weigh it based on sustainability and accessibility, sustainability environmentally and accessibility in terms of transit, and have different philosophies about weighting that 2 times or 4 times for each. We got a presentation from the Environmental Health Services Division of King County Public Health and the services they provide across the county, and presenting to the Board of Health for approval on January 1, 2025, presenting it to us there first. They basically do a lot of the permitting work, right? So like permitting for restaurants, local businesses, schools, as well as public health education. And then we got a presentation from King County Hazardous Waste Management and the work they do controlling things like battery waste, chemical storage, removing carcinogens from personal care products. And they have a slate of legislative priorities they're bringing forward and hoping that SCA and I believe will consider. So that is all.
Thank you. Any other regional committees? Okay. There are no commission reports tonight in our agenda. Next up, city manager. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, first off, recognize several people, I guess. We had a really bad car crash on Wednesday last week. It was just after 5 o'clock. A single driver ran off the road into a tree near the YMCA. The car was on fire. Several community members that witnessed it stopped to help, used their own vehicle fire extinguishers to start trying to put the fire out, stopped cars to get more. Our responding officers were MPO Charles and Officer Gomez. They did the same, kind of switched between trying to get the vehicle open to get the driver out and trying to keep flames off of him until the fire department got there and were able to put the fire out and pry the doors open and life flight the driver to Harborview where he was revived. And so just wanted to recognize everyone involved as far as everything that I know and the reports that I've received. It was a pretty heroic effort by everybody involved, including our community members that witnessed it and stopped and helped. I do also just want to plug the Veterans Day event. It's one of those that isn't necessarily a city put on event. Mayor Clark has done that, but I think each year it's grown a little bit, and we always get good feedback as staff, like it was ours and we did a really good job, but it's not. And so I just want to plug that event.
Any questions for the city manager? Councilmember Charbonneau, your mic's on. Do you have a question? Okay. Next up is our consent agenda. Any desired changes or alterations to tonight's consent agenda? Seeing none, show the consent agenda approved as written. There are no public hearings. There are no unfinished business. Moving on to general business, we have a pre-legislative session presentation on our priorities tonight. And we have a guest tonight that's going to give us a description. Shelley Helder, come on up to the podium.
If I can, just briefly,
Sure.
before Shelley gets going. Thank you for coming, Shelley. Shelley Helder is our state lobbyist with Gordon Thomas Honeywell. And before she gets into her presentation, I just wanted to reiterate and stress to the council that while we like our draft legislative priorities, they are draft. legislative priorities. And we put them together kind of based on conversations that we've had, priorities that the council's expressed. But we really expect it to be something that gets the council talking and working through those so that we can put final priorities in front of you for adoption next month. And so just want to reiterate that we don't necessarily intend that they're final. We assume that they'll move and be adjusted and everything else. So thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I am Shelley Helder, and I'm honored to be with you this evening. You're at my first council meeting as your new state lobbyist. I work with my colleague, Holly Sanabria, who used to work with the city. She's transitioned to a new role on our team as our policy analyst. So she'll be supporting me, and I'll be the face of Newcastle and Olympia, and I'm honored to be so. So this evening, we're going to begin the conversation to prepare the city for the 2025 state legislative session. Tonight, I want to start by just kind of highlighting some of the successes we've had to date. We'll talk about why we've had those successes, and then what we expect from the 2025 session, what the draft priorities are for your consideration and feedback, and then we'll wrap up by talking about next steps. After my presentation, I am looking forward to any of your questions or comments about the priorities. So the city began contracting with Gordon Thomas Honeywell in 2022, and over the last 3 legislative sessions, we have secured a little over $949,000 for 3 different projects within the city. And I want to point this out both to acknowledge the government relations services are paid for with taxpayer dollars. And so if that's the case, we want to make sure that there is a benefit to the Newcastle taxpayers. And that the city is seeing a return on that investment. And secondly, I want to note that the success we've had in Olympia is because we've been utilizing some of the best practices, strategies in order to achieve that success. And so that's something that we want to continue to do as we're considering developing priorities for the 2025 session. Some of the things that we've done is that we consider what the political climate is, we consider what the budget context is. We pursue grant funding to make sure that we are competitive with the funding requests we do advance for earmarks. And we've engaged early and often with the city's legislators. And so that's what we're going to continue to do. So the 2025 legislative session is going to be the first of the 2-year biennium, which means it's going to be the long 105-day session. And the primary objective of the legislative session is to adopt the state's operating, capital, and transportation budgets. They will also consider thousands of bills and, in all likelihood, adopt several hundred. The September revenue forecast, so that's the forecast that determines how much revenue the state will be receiving over the next biennium, or in the current biennium. The September forecast indicated that the current budget is a little, the current revenues for the budget are a little under 500 million short. Sounds like a lot of money to me. Surprisingly, the state budget has the buffer to absorb that, so it's not of concern for the current budget. But the implication is that for development of the next biennial budget, revenues are not going to grow at the rate that they were anticipated to. And so the state is going to be facing not only slower revenue growth, but also increasing costs. There are statutory requirements for certain expenses to increase, and they have to honor those legal increases. One example that will go into effect for this next budget cycle is an expansion of eligibility for the Working Connections Child Care Program, which is child care that's provided for low-income families. Eligibility expansion, increased costs for the state. It's just one example of how rising costs, lowering revenues, it's going to be a tight budget year for the state. So that's the operating budget. Transportation budget is facing a similar picture, and it has for many years. the state's transportation revenues have been declining, and as you all are likely experiencing with a lot of your transportation projects, the costs are continuing to escalate. The way that the state has handled that in recent years is anytime they want to fund a new project, they develop a transportation revenue package. So they identify new revenue and then they dedicate it to specific projects over a long period of time. And that's kind of the main way the state is continuing to, I expect the same thing to occur in this upcoming cycle. Not a lot of opportunity for new transportation funding, but I do know that conversations about a revenue package are beginning. Typically takes several years for a package to come together, but it's important to be engaged in those conversations early to make sure that you get a benefit when they do come to fruition. The final budget that the state develops is the capital budget. It is the smallest of the three. The size of the capital budget is a function of the operating budget. And so with the operating budget not expected to grow as much, the capital budget is not expected to grow as much either. That being said, there's still opportunity within the capital budget. And so that's where we see the greatest opportunity in this upcoming cycle. The political context, everyone knows there's an election coming up in a few weeks. I'd say the biggest outcomes or the things to keep an eye on when it comes to state impacts are the initiatives. There's 3 initiatives that will have relatively significant impact on state budgets depending on how they turn out. There's also, we don't expect to see any change in majorities in the legislature. I think Democrats will continue to hold the majority in both the House and the Senate. Though after the election, there will be a change in committee assignments. So the House and the Senate have a process that's committee on committees, and they decide who's going to serve on which committee and what issues each committee will address. So that will be coming in December. Also, they determine who will serve as the chair of those committees, and that's significant because it determines then which bills get scheduled for public hearings and which ones make it through committee and through the process. So that's what we expect to happen in 2025. Now let's talk about what the city's draft priorities are for the session. So the first draft priority is a capital budget request for $325,000 for Lake Bourne Park North End access. So this project is part of the Lake Bourne Park Master Plan, and it will construct parking, an area for vehicles to turn around, and pedestrian access to the north end of the park. The total project is estimated to cost $650,000, so this request is half, asking the state to match the city's investment. Simply based on the size of the request, it is a relatively competitive request. I think it's also attractive because we can say that the state would be the last dollar in and the project would be able to be completed with the state's investment. I would say the only downside to the project is more and more budget writers are asking for every project to have submitted for a grant application first. We haven't submitted for a grant for this project. It's a relatively small project to have done that. And so I think given the other benefits that it has going for us, I think it's still a competitive project to advance. The second draft priority is a twofold request. First, as for additional resources to support local transportation needs, particularly maintenance and preservation, as well as safety and mobility projects. And then the second is a request for $900,000 from the state's transportation budget to complete the non-motorized improvements along Southeast May Park Drive. I just mentioned that the state's transportation budget is strapped. And so I think including this request is not necessarily something that we think is a guaranteed. It's more keeping it on here in case the opportunity arises. We want to be prepared and not miss out. The third draft priority is a request that the legislature change the law to allow for greater flexibility with real estate excise taxes so that they can be used towards regional housing efforts like ARCH. In years past, there's also been discussions on how to create a local option to have a tiered REIT. The state has a tiered REIT, but the local REIT is flat. And so that idea has been floating around for a few years, and every year it dies because the Department of Revenue says that it's too difficult to implement. And so the request is that Department of Revenue do analysis or provide guidance on how that could be feasible. And so that's kind of like a twofold request on how to advance affordable housing revenue for local governments. The fourth draft priority acknowledges the shortfalls in the current behavioral health care system and asks the legislature to make both policy changes and investments to expand the access to the continuum of behavioral health services. And then last but not least is a request for the state to support the city's escalating costs of providing public safety services. These last two items are also two priorities that are listed on the agenda for the Association of Washington Cities. So I would anticipate coordinating with the association to advance both of those. So transitioning now to look at what comes next. In a few weeks, we'll know the outcome of the November election. Following that, we'd hope that the city would approve your legislative agenda, and then we would meet with the 41st District legislators to brief them on the city's priorities. So they have all that information ready to go before the legislative session begins. All the new as well as returning legislators will be in Olympia in December for committee assembly days. I think of it a little bit like back to school night for the legislature. And it's the informal beginning for the legislative session. Bills can be pre-filed starting December 1. So we will see beginning in December what the ideas are that people have been working on. And then, of course, the legislative session starts in January 13th, and it'll be fast and furious until the first cutoff. So with that, I welcome questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Is there questions? Go ahead, Councilor.
Thanks, Shelley. Nice to meet you in person. My only comment is for the Lakeborn North End access. Do you think it's worth talking about, not necessarily putting it in here, but when we're talking to the legislators, that they have already given us money for the fence for the historic cemetery, and this would provide parking very close to the cemetery entrance. So just another detail that might help them move it forward. I don't know.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I think that's definitely something we'll want to include. When we get your guidance on whether these are the right priorities for the city, we will develop one-page fact sheets that kind of go into more detail on what the requests are and why it would be a good project for the state to invest in, so we can be sure to include that.
Other questions? Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Shelley. So I think along that same vein, I personally find it very powerful, the for transportation funding priority, what it would do is it would take the last section of May Creek Park Drive, which is one of the a main thorough road in our city, and it takes the last part of it that does not have a sidewalk on either side and removes that. And I think that's talking about that idea you presented of like, the legislature wants to see that you put it in for a grant, or at least like in the, request here, we're requesting half of it, right? Half of the total project cost, which I believe you all thought was best practices. So I guess in that sense of like, not only are we doing that, we've already kind of met that part way, right? We started to add those sidewalks to May Creek Park Drive. We've progressively had this as like a very long-term goal for the city too. And I think I hope that's really strong context. I think that's important to say out loud. And then I had one add-in for the behavioral health item, which I wanted to, so if you think specificity would help with this, and I went over this with the city manager in our one-on-one meeting, and this is very new too. So talking about behavioral health and helping fill gaps in the local public safety response. There's a lot of services out there, the programs in Redmond and other cities that pair mental health professionals with police officers. So specifically for us as a King County contract city, there's a new program that's called the Therapeutic Response Unit, I believe. If it would be powerful to specifically request dollars to fund, help us pay for as a city a mental health professional from the Therapeutic Response Unit. So not just saying, obviously the language we have is important in that, but saying, hey, specifically we would like this, or like we would like to work towards this, even if it's something we put in now and then it's, maybe we don't get it next year, but it's a continued sort of echo. That's what I would like to add that in specifically. And I'm happy to speak more to that if there's questions about that. But it's something I won't speak for the chief. I believe he would be open to, and specifically for us as the King County contract city that's being rolled out. So I thought the specificity could help us there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the specific benefit to Newcastle is, I think, what we want to prioritize. Everything we have here right now is of benefit to everyone, which is great. But if we're wanting to advance what's most important to Newcastle, I think getting the assurance that if that funding is allocated, then it would mean a therapeutic response unit in Newcastle. I think that would be really powerful.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for your presentation. And last year, at the end of a legislative session, we were talking about we'd like to go there this year. And I'd like to know when, the time, a better time to go there on behalf of Newcastle. We as a council, or some of us, we will be able to go there to make connections with, our representatives. So when will be the better time?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that. I should have included it in next steps because it is an important next step. Visiting legislators in Olympia during session is really a key part of the process. AWC has their city action days the third week in February. That, I think that's when folks came down last year, and it was not an ideal time last year. This year, I wouldn't say it's not the best time this year. I do think coming a little bit earlier in the session would be better. So maybe late January or first week of February would be better. But we can work with you and city staff to find the time that works best.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. While Shelley is here, do we have any desired changes to this so we can give her some guidance on our priorities? I mean, as listed, is everybody okay with the priorities as listed on the sheet and she discussed? Any objections? Go ahead.
No, although, I mean, did you want to change, Councilmember Charbonneau, were you proposing a specific change?
I mean, I guess it was my understanding that it would. We were voting on it tonight. The city manager had told me we were voting on it at a future meeting. It's not a huge change. It's a small change, but I think it seemed consensus, and I believe Shelley understood it as well.
Did we have this as a vote on a future meeting?
Yeah, we're not expecting, we want feedback, but we're
I
not
got you.
expecting you to vote on anything. If we can certainly put some draft language in there and get feedback on it.
All right, but seeing no real desire to make major changes, we'll incorporate whatever Councilmember Charbonneau has tweaked in there and go with that, okay? Well, Shelley, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. Appreciate your time and presentation. And thank you for supporting our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that concludes our general business. It's time for additional public comment. City Clerk, do we have anybody signed up? No, okay. We'll consider the second public comment closed. We are moving now on to the planning calendar. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking towards the November 5th meeting, it's primarily focused on the budget. We have a few consent agenda items for contracts and bid awards. But really, we will have the budget study session, but really we'll try to bring follow-up items for that to kind of dial up the budget ordinance discussion. And then our action items for the rest of that evening are the public hearings. And what we don't have on there is the resolution for property tax. We'll have to add that. And then the budget adoption ordinance.
So that's a 6 o'clock start then?
So we can talk about that if the council, so if we think we need an hour, great. Based on the discussion so far, it doesn't feel like we do. And so, I mean, we can do a 6:30. It really kind of depends on what the council thinks, the time that they need to discuss.
Anybody opposed to 6:30? No, 6:30. Okay. Okay, any questions for the city manager on the planning calendar? Okay, seeing none, we are moving on to our additional agenda item for this evening. We will be in executive session this evening to discuss with legal counsel pending or potential litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 paragraph G. Executive sessions are closed to the public pursuant to state law. We will convene into an executive session at 8:05 for 10 minutes. We invite City Manager Pingle, Attorney Chambers to the executive session. We expect to return in approximately 10 minutes after we start. After the executive session, the council will reconvene and may take further action. Okay, executive session. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the council has returned from executive session where we discussed with legal counsel pending or potential legal litigation pursuant to RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1 paragraph G. At this point, we did have no action was taken at the executive session. However, we do have a motion to discuss. Councilmember Sherlock, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the city agree to settle Fung versus City of Newcastle, King County cause number 24-2-11865-9 KNT for $285,000 with the city contributing 20% toward the settlement and its carrier paying the remaining, subject to the city attorney approving of the settlement and release, and authorize the city manager to sign the approved settlement and release.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the city agree to settle Fung versus City of Newcastle, King County, cause number 24-2-11865-9 KNT for $285,000 with the city contributing 20% toward the settlement and its carrier paying the remaining, subject to the city attorney approving of the settlement and release and authorizing the city manager to sign the approved settlement and release. Any comments from anybody? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And with that, our meeting is concluded, adjourned. Thank you.